That works.
Sorry, guys.
Harry, your dogs are on point.
That's right. They were waiting for the live button to be pushed. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the GoMeanGreen.com Barbershop podcast. My name is Evan. And you guys forgot your parts of what to do here.
Harry's muted.
Obviously,
This is Harry.
Episode of the season here. Harry's got some dog issues. It's episode
Sorry, guys.
237. Let me just, Harry, you realize that we started doing these back with Daryl Dickey, his last year as head coach. Then we had Todd Dodge. And I've just kind of forgotten everybody in between. But once now we are at a new coach. We are 17 days till kickoff, and quarterback situation, I guess, has been resolved. So, gentlemen, let's talk about it. Where do we start?
I mean, we've got a quarterback name. We got a starter finally, which we've been waiting for a while. We thought it was going to happen earlier on, but Stone Earle's the guy, it sounds like to me at this point, and I'm pretty pumped about it. I think JD is as well. We can hear his thoughts, but I really feel like Stone showed us some good things last season, and in limited snaps, obviously. So there's some question marks, but it sounds like he earned the job. And he's been around the program. He's been a starter before at Abilene Christian. It's not like he's not been in the limelight before at all. I guess it's a little bit, interesting that the guy they went out into the marketplace to bring in, Chandler Rogers, did not get it, but it sounds like they're both going to play. So I think at the end of the day, to me, may the best man win. And if Earl's the guy, let's get behind him 100%.
So, JD, let me get over to you before I get to Ashton on this. Going into spring ball, everybody kind of thought they were going to pick a quarterback. Didn't happen. A lot of real people really thought Chandler was going to take over, but now it looks like, Storm's getting the start. Is that surprising to you?
Yeah, I mean, the way I described it the other day is horse racing track. We're coming around the last corner, and it was, leaving spring, it was Reuter and Chandler, and Reuter came out of nowhere. He had an unbelievable spring. Stone was kind of a forgotten guy leaving spring. He was a guy that we weren't talked about. The best way to put it, he was forgotten. And the way Morrison and the staff has even kind of put it going into fall, like he had things he had to work on, accuracy, understand the offense. And the best way that I can think about or describe it is it just seems like the things he had to work on, he went 110% on them. So, I think kind of came out of nowhere, Secretariat style, and passed the two front runners and kind of won the job out of nowhere. It's pretty impressive. 3 weeks to completely go from third to name starter first week. So, you got to give him credit.
Ashton, your thoughts on that?
So, every time there's a new coach and there's this whole unknown, I never really know where to go with it. So, what JD was saying about, who was leading in the spring, that's, brand new. They're 2 months on the job. So I feel like there's really nothing to take out of that in the spring. So, even when Seth came in 2016, that spring, it was kind of obvious because, of the Alec Morris situation, but at the same time, it's hard for me to pinpoint who should be the guy, right? Because we don't really know that much about the offense. We've never seen, none of these guys came in with just a bunch of starter pedigree, and we say that not Jace, but we say that Stone started at ACU. Well, that's AAC and ACU are different stories. So it's really hard for me to point a finger on who should get the job at this point. If a guy had a great spring, well, what does that really mean with a brand new offense? The coaching staff's still figuring everything out too. So it's impossible for me to read. So I'm happy that, we got a guy. I don't like hearing both are going to play. I really wish it was just, one guy, but a guy right now, 17 days before the season starts, I don't even think that really a QB1 doesn't really even exist still. It does in theory, but I it's hard to ever take that with too much less than just a grain of salt.
Is that concerning to anybody, really? I mean, is it
Very
concerning that, everybody loves the underdog story, but do we feel like we should have had this nailed down? There shouldn't even have been, we should have been so solid that we didn't need an underdog story here.
So the thing that's concerning
North
me
Texas,
is
we need a quarterback controversy though, right?
Yeah.
True.
I don't like the way that Morris worded it. I mean, that would, to me, like as a fan, as a guy that's followed the team, that's like I would say the one mistake he's made so far is I wished he would have kind of worded it a little better. Like, Stone's our guy, but what I've kept hearing is like, Chandler didn't lose the job. It's not like Chandler showed up on campus and didn't, I feel like it was more of Stone came in and just like played his way into the starting job. But what we heard in spring was, Chandler was the leader, but Morris loved what Seth and company did with the goal line package, the Tim Tebow-esque, goal line packages for Stone Earl. So like what we'd heard was if Chandler is a starter, there's still going to be Stone Earl packages. So now to me, it's kind of flip-flopped. It's like Stone's a starter, but we're still going to have Chandler Rogers, running some Wildcat-esque. I mean, because he is one of the fastest guys on the team. But yes, I wish that in the press conference it would have been a little more Stone's our guy, Rogers our guy. I wish it would have been a little more worded a little different, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's always, I never liked the idea of an unknown, I don't like it when it's two guys. It never works out. Somebody just posted that, I think. Yeah. Rod, Steam, Shaft, one. Yeah, like that's basically, I agree with that. It can be a disaster. It can work, I guess, at times, but it's always just weird. And to me, it's hard for me to listen to, because remember when Alec Morris was a starter and then there was some whispers that like maybe Mason overtook him at the end of fall camp, and we're like, wait, wasn't this guy came in, he transferred, he went to freaking Alabama, like this guy should be the guy, right? Like why would we have an Alabama guy, and he's not playing, and then it ended up being Alec Morris for 3 quarters, and then all of a sudden it was the Mason Fine show until he hurt his shoulder. So it's always just odd to me when you don't have a guy, and I think that when you don't have a clear-cut guy that just takes it and runs with it, that's a problem. And I'm not saying this is going to be a problem, but it is concerning, to answer your earlier question, Evan, because if I was talking to a fan of Idaho and they said, who's your starting quarterback, I'd probably say, I don't know.
All right. So what does Stone Earl bring us or have that, a Chandler Rogers isn't as strong? Or what would we thought we were going to get strength out of Chandler Rogers that we didn't think that, Stone had, but obviously that's not in play here. What's the differences here we're looking at on the field?
I mean, it's hard to pinpoint that, Evan, because it's like Fort Knox to get into practices. I mean, there's not a lot of – JD's been to some, I've been to some. I mean, basically you only get like 20, 25 minutes as part of the media to evaluate, and it's all mainly calisthenics and jumping jacks, and there's some drills and things like that. But it's really hard to make a good assessment. I think they both have their strengths and weaknesses. I just think, we're all kind of thinking if you go out and pull a guy that's had Division I experience, albeit at Louisiana Monroe, and the funny irony of it is I think Cal offered the same Chandler Rogers, and we got him to come here instead of him going to Cal. So I think it took us a little bit by surprise that the guy that had more proven experience, more market attractiveness, was not the guy that ended up getting the job. I don't think we're able to really pinpoint, specifically why that is, just because of access. Is that fair, JD? Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I really heard is Stone's been a great teammate. The players got behind Stone early on. He was a guy that was super liked by the last regime. The one stat that kind of stood out to me, we haven't got to see much of practices, but the thing that stood out was like in crunch time and, short yardage situations and times that mattered. This fall, Stone Earl was completing 80% of his passes, and he went, I think, 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. I think those top stats have, those are the type of things that's winning the job. That, and like I said, amazing teammate, and has went above and beyond, learned the playbook. I think he's checked too many boxes that there's no way to not start him at this point. And like I said, I don't think it's anything that Chandler did, but I wish we'd been able to see more. I wish we'd been able to get into a scrimmage to kind of see. We're just kind of having to go off hearsay at this point, but you're getting it from a lot of different angles, from parents, from other players, from guys on the staff, that it just got to a point where Stone's got to be the guy. There's no way we can set him. I don't know if it was I call him Stony football. He's got a little bit of a Mason Fine, Johnny football, like the play's not dead until it's over type aspect about him. And I hope that carries on until Saturdays.
All right, so let's move away from the quarterback situation just a little bit. Obviously, that's everybody's talking about it, but let's talk about some of the other positions, what we're looking at. 17 days away. We've Stone Earl as our quarterback. We've got what looks to be a pretty nice stable of running backs here. So let's talk about those guys. Who are we going to see first? Who are we going to see most? Who are you really looking at this year? Who's your underdog for the running back group? Not everybody at once.
I mean, I think it's good to see that we've heard that Oscar's kind of back to 100%. We know he's kind of battled some injuries. I think Kaka Ragsdale is probably going to be the lead horse this year. I do think we're going to see a lot more, not as much ground and pound, more get the running backs out in space, let them go to work. So I think that's where a Kaka Ragsdale AO is going to really maybe take the next step up. But I still think, I mean, you got a guy like Oscar Attaway in your backfield. I mean, you're going to have to use him. I still think all four. I think BK Jackson's probably the fifth guy in that room. That, I mean, Morris, I would say it's probably one of the hardest things is him and Cobbs to figure out how to get this stable of thoroughbreds enough touches to keep them all satisfied. Like I said, I was amazed they all made it through this offseason without transferring. But I think this year is going to be really interesting to see how, with us not probably running the ball as much as we did last year, to keep them all happy, keep them all satisfied, if they all stay healthy.
To me, it's interesting because, 2 years ago, we were talking about, Oscar as like, wow, how do we have this guy kind of thing. And so I think that if he's fully healthy and he's finally back to normal, I think he's far and away the best one we have. I've always been a big Oscar fan. I saw him in practice a ton when I was still covering the team. I was around him a lot. I was around him in practice. He looked like he didn't belong there in a good way. Like he looked like wow, that guy's big and cut and thick and chiseled like a running back, and those other ones aren't, And he always stood out to me in a way that was just different. And when you have a team that, a program that doesn't have a lot of guys that just stood out, a lot of our guys are undersized or they're this or they're that. It's just, that's the North Texas way, right? KD Davis didn't look like, Craig Robertson, but he, has more tackles, so that's just kind of how we roll. I think that if Oscar's not lingering and just a different player since the injuries, then I think that he's going to end up being the top dog. That would be my prediction right now, is that he would be the one to get the most run if he's healthy and if he's the same Oscar as he was before, which we don't know.
Man, I mean, we have a wealth of talent. I agree with JD. How these guys, how we kept them with NIL and everything else going on. How do we keep? Because I think we really literally have 5 running backs that are Division I quality, capable, talented players. So if it's me and I'm Eric Morris, I know he likes to run the air raid and throw the ball. This is a running team. I mean, look at this offensive line. Look at what Seth was doing. I think that's the strength of this team, and it's going to be a great test because they're playing against a P5, caliber defensive line in Cal. I mean, Cal's not Ohio State, but they're going to be tough, and it's going to be real interesting. But if it was me, I'd run the ball right down their throats and make them stop us because I think we have that strong a running game.
I like the years where we think we've only got one or two, and then all of a sudden we've got 5 or 6. I hate the years where we think we got 5, and then we lose 3 to injuries, and we're like, what just happened? So I'm very cautiously optimistic on that.
I feel the same exact way. Cautiously optimistic. I feel like, it's the season of best shape of their life. They look great. They're great teammates. They're all getting along. It's the season of all the hyperbole, right? I mean, when you're going into the season, again, not to be negative, but it's hard for me to just buy in that we have 6 great running backs. I think running back's one of those positions that is, as long as you've got the right system and the right offensive line, anybody can be a quality running back, in our conference. That's just the way it is. And the NFL's like that too. I mean, the highest paid running back in the NFL this year is going to be a rookie. The running backs aren't what they used to be. They're kind of plug and play positions, right?
Right.
And so, in terms of pure skill, I think that Oscar would be the one. And I think there's a steeper drop off than we all think there are, because we've seen a lot of these guys. They've all got time over the past couple seasons, and we know what they all can do. To Harry's point, yeah, I wonder if we think that's going to be, throw the ball over the yard kind of thing. But what happened in Seth's first year? We gave the ball to Jeff Wilson a lot because Jeff Wilson's really freaking good. So Eric could be sitting there and thinking, okay, you know what? I've got 3 good running backs. They're all shining right now. My line's blocking. I'm not afraid to run the ball. And hopefully he thinks like that, because, if Seth didn't change his system up, the last 2 seasons, we don't have any success at all, or not nearly as much success. One would think that we don't win that many games at all. And while Austin had a great year last year, it was the running game that got us to where we were going.
All right. So, JD, I'm going to ask you this question here, and it's already come up a couple times, and we already had it on the list to talk about. 17 days away, but the early forecast looks like it could be really, really hot, like 101 degrees at game time. I mean, we're talking about one of those epic first games. I do not want to be on the student side. I don't even want to be on the home side, much less the student side looking, or the guests looking into that sun at 101 degrees. What does that do for us versus Cal conditioning? What does that do against running games versus passing games? How can that be a factor that can help us in that opening game against Cal?
So I really thought this was, me thinking, I'm like, this is going to be a huge benefit to the roster, to North Texas. But I interviewed Jim McGill, who covers Cal. He's covered Cal since early 2000s. And he kind of pointed out California's got a lot of Texas kids. So I don't think the Texas heat's really going to be that big of surprise for them. And then if it is 115, 120 on the field, it doesn't matter if you're Superman, it's still going to have effect. The other night I was talking to some guys, and they were like, just pound the rock, just, run Cal till they pass out. And I'm like, there's a good chance that we pass out too. It's still still 120 for us too. I do think it will have a little bit of an advantage for us, but not as big as I originally thought, looking at the forecast, thinking, we're playing these guys because when I was interviewing Jim, he's like, it was 125 in my heat shed here, but at his place it was like 65 and no humidity. But I still think, I know Cal's practicing in different facilities. They've got the heat turned up. I think it'll be a little advantage for North Texas, but for the most part, I don't think it'll be that big of.
Is it really a situation where this is one thing we want to be advantage, but how often does it actually play into an advantage? Everybody talks about, they're not used to this kind of weather. They're not used to the humidity. They're not used to.
But Ball State, in 2013, that game was clearly a heat game. That was the heat was the 12th man. Dudes were walking off the field cramping left and right. They were talking about it on the sidelines. I like what JD just said, because you can sit there and practice and say, you got a lot of Texas kids. That's fine. But it's different when the bullets start flying and they're out there and it is, 3:00 kick, right? Is it 3:00?
Yeah. 3:00.
Yeah.
They want to look for a little hot time to make.
That's freaking terrible for them. Like, it's going to be terrible for us, And so I don't see how it can't be a factor. And I think that, the Ball State game, I always point back to that because, about halfway through the game, the second half was when we turned it on. That was the second half was totally different than the first half. You can just see it. It was different. You can see the whole game shifted. And a lot of that, I think, was because of that Ball State. They just didn't know what to do. They were not used to it. Now, again, they were definitely in a cold weather state, where they were coming from, or a cold weather environment. But
so
yeah,
keep
it was
good
it was
pace till halftime. Hope they're all IV'd and losing it at halftime, and then put it on in the second half. That's the strategy. All right, we'll put that. I think that's a good idea.
Let me piggyback real quick, Evan. Real quick, one thing I was going to say too, and JD can testify to this as well. The athletic center stays very nice and cool. These aren't the good old days at Fouts where you're outside the whole time on that turf at 100 degrees. And no offense, I mean, I know they're getting them out there, and I know the scrimmage was in Apogee and things of that nature, but I'm just saying that we have definitely stepped up in the world in terms of that practice facility, because it's very comfortable, I would say, in there for sure.
Well, at Fouts, it was actually cooler out on the field than it was underneath in the dungeon.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. So that was a change there. All right, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. A lot was made in some of the performances and some of the gaps last year. We had some situations where a lot of people were concerned about going into this year. What are we looking at? What's the defense going to show us for the gaps we filled on the offseason and the players we lost? And there's still some unknowns there. Somebody start talking about. Let's talk about it here. Let's talk about the front line.
Yeah. I think defensive line, we're going to see a lot of what we saw last year. I mean, they're going from a 4-man front to a 3-man front, but it's still going to be the same names. Mason Richards moving from linebacker more to a defensive end. Roderick Brown is still going to be the anchor in the middle. There's a guy called June. But Tafi Valia, number 51. I think him and Portland Rasal are going to be that third defensive lineman. I think they're going to rotate in. The part of the defense that's really scaring me, I felt like midway through the offseason was probably defensive back, but now it's probably linebacker, just because you're replacing Larry Nixon, you're replacing Katie Davis, and you've got Woods still down with injury. It's going to be a young guy that's going to replace him, whether it's Wazlowski, Matthew Moore, who's a freshman. I know we had a question a while ago about another true freshman that could step up this year. I mean, it's going to be a guy that we probably haven't heard of that's going to step up in that linebacker role. So I think defensive backs, you're going to hear a lot of names that we've heard before. Defensive line is going to be the same way. Linebacker's the one where we're really going to have somebody step up and fill some big shoes.
What he said. Yeah. I mean, what he said, he hit it all. I mean, honestly, he hit it well, and it's linebacker. I mean, that is absolutely the question mark for this team. And I would also add depth. I think that we are pretty strong on the defensive line, unless we get an injury. If something happens to Rod Brown, if any of these guys go down, then that's, I think, the challenge. And this is a tough league. This is a tough schedule. For this entire 12-game schedule, especially the back half of this is tough. So to stay healthy is a challenge. But I would say, in my review, the secondary is a lot stronger, I think, even than last year. And I think, having John Davis back, two of the young guys that we brought in that are going to be freshmen, they probably won't start, but they're going to play. And I mean, Morris has talked about them quite a bit in his interview. So I'm actually pretty bully on the defense, other than, like JD said, linebacker and then overall depth.
Just to throw out a number, and just I had it right here pulled up, just between Katie Davis and Larry Nixon, we're replacing 671 career tackles. That's a lot of experience. That's a lot of games played. That's
all in one season too.
Yeah. If it wasn't for the COVID year.
Yeah. No, it's one of the things that I think is always because when you get a new coach, a new system, you never, unless it's a defensive coach, you never think about the defense. So it's really hard to even pinpoint what we're going to look like on defense, in my opinion, because we don't know what to expect. So, one of the things I really liked about, Seth's first year with Ref and Eck is that they brought out some guys that we were like thought were afterthoughts. And by the end of the day, Nate Brooks was a stud at the corner when we thought he was an afterthought. So it's different coaches getting different things out of different guys. So linebacker, I think there's some dudes that can play, but yeah, it's kind of a question mark. And of course, it's going to be a question mark when you replace, a guy like KD. Just regardless, just a guy who just was, again, more hyperbole, but it's just, thinking about the heart and soul of the defense and all that stuff. That's hard to replace. So I'm actually more excited to see what the defense is going to look like than the offense in a way, because it's kind of a massive unknown. And one of the things that's always really fun about the early season is to see like what new guys step up out of nowhere.
So there's some questions
take
there,
the next step.
Ashton, that came up here. Jay, do you want to address this? I know one of the questions came up besides Landon Sides and the 5 DBs. Any other true freshmen who might get playtime?
Yeah, so this question came from John. The guy I picked out, I got a chance to interview him after he committed, Matthew Moore, linebacker. To me, if you watch his highlight film, he's like a bullet. He's a guy that's name's been mentioned by the staff multiple times to me this fall as a guy that, he's going to be a dude. If he doesn't, lead the team in tackles against Cal, there's going to be a game in the near future that he probably does lead the defense and in tackles. He's a guy. If I had to pinpoint one guy from our last class, he was a guy that I thought was extremely underrated. Talking to him, he's extremely smart, and size-wise, speed-wise, he was a guy that it wasn't making a lot of sense why he didn't have more offers. So that would be, if I had to pick one guy, that's the guy.
I agree. When I was at practice, he really stands out just in drills. He's really, doesn't look like a true freshman or whatever. He looks more mature and his speed stands out. He's got some really good speed. So, and I think that exactly what Ashton said, that to me, the fun of this is seeing those guys that you don't really know that much about, that come out and just kind of show themselves to be really good players. And I think just from reading between the lines, I feel like Morris sees that in some guys maybe that we don't have names on yet, but there's a certain optimism, I think, about the overall talent level on the defense in particular, but especially in the secondary. I think the secondary is going to surprise some people in terms of what they've got. I think linebacker is a little bit more of a question mark.
I just want to take you back to what Ashton said and what you said, Harry. I don't think there's nobody that covers or watches North Texas football that before the first game last year would have said, two of your best defensive players was Mason Richard and Rich Tejada. Those guys both kind of came out of nowhere, and they both became all-conference players technically overnight. So I do think there will be one or two guys that will kind of step up and make a name for themselves this season that we're not going to talk about on the podcast. We haven't seen, popped up on GoMeanGreen. The other thing I would say is the Coach Capone, Coach Cratch, coming from Iowa State, they've arguably been one of the best defenses in the country the last half decade. And they're not a defense that's loaded with five-star guys. They're going out there and getting guys to fill places. A guy we've talked about, Chavez Brown, was a JUCO wide receiver. Now he's going to make the two deep as a linebacker. I think this staff is going to be looking under rocks. They're not just be looking at, trying to find positions and looking for height. They're going to be going and filling voids in places we haven't thought about. So that's the thing that kind of gives me optimism, where I haven't had optimism in the past about our defenses. I think Coach Capone, Coach Crash, they're super young, that they're going. We already talked about in the scrimmage, we heard them running 4-man fronts. I don't think it's going to be like, this is our defense, we're going with this. They're going to patch together and make it work. So that's one thing that gives me a little bit of optimism about the defense moving forward.
Yeah, I think that, to your point about the coaches coming in, the player development, I think is always, I think everybody who's heard me talk on this podcast over the years, I'm not the biggest recruiting guy. I always think that we put too much stock into like ratings and who this guy is. And then they get there and they S the bed. And then this walk-on is a stud. It's just how it happens. At North Texas, it's right now and probably for the foreseeable future, it's always going to be more about player development than because we're not going to get 4 or 5 star recruits. We're not going to get guys that are just off the streets, can walk right in and are P5 guys. So if you can get a coach that's going to, take some chances, not to be afraid to play a guy that just because they like him more than the guy that should play, but because they see something, then that's what I want to see. And those guys have done a lot with not as much. They've taken guys that they're not getting the cream of the crop, like JD said. And so yeah, I'm actually really excited to see the defenses because again, I think in this conference it's going to be about taking points off the board just as much as scoring, and we're going to get in shootouts, and we're going to have to play some freaking D at some point, and we don't want to get into these shootouts like in 2017 and 2018 when it was just like, let's see if we can score 45, and hopefully they only score 41, and every time we get on the field, we know we can score a touchdown, but we got to stop them. And SMU sucks.
We just had to add it in there. I felt like that was
We all agree on that point. We all agree.
I don't know. I saw it pop up, and yeah, I mean, KJ's right. SMU sucks.
Well, let me ask this question. Any one of you guys, JD, Harry, if you had to go back and say under Morris compared to maybe under, even go back to Seth or even back to previous, his coaching style, the attitude, what we're feeling. I mean, obviously this whole conference change and realignment, we can get into that later, but what is the overall feeling of where we're at under Morris right now at this time compared to where we might have been in previous coaches or even in the middle of their tenure?
I would say optimism. I feel like it's a very optimistic. He's just an optimistic guy.
I feel like the fan base and some of the, seeing some of the reactions and people showing up to events, I feel like the fan base has definitely been energized by the change.
Well, that's the unknown, though, right? That's always going to happen with a new coach. That would happen with McCarney. I mean, it's a new coach.
Even with
McCarney,
right?
it
made it sound like.
No, I'm sorry. Sorry, Dan, I love you.
Come on, Evan. That happened with McCarney.
I texted him on his birthday. Love you, Dan. No, but I mean, but that's just the way it is. Like, that's just, I mean, it's you do it because you need a change in voice, you need a change in face, you just need a change. I mean, so, Seth, somebody, people could make the argument that Seth should have stayed another year. People could make the argument that Seth should have went. It was time for him to go. We all can probably agree on that. I would have liked to have seen one more year, but I'm a Seth guy, so what can I say? Everybody knows I'm a homer there. But I think there's always going to be that with a new coach. And that's just in any sport, any walk of life with athletics. It's just if you get a new guy in there, you can't help but be optimistic because it's the ignorance is bliss. You don't know. It's kind of the opposite of fear of the unknown, I guess, because you're not afraid of it. You're hopeful because you made a change for some reason. Now, if we made a change because a coach left to bigger and better things, which I would love to happen at some point, like Grant McCasland, then maybe you're not. Maybe then you're a little bit like, oh, damn, man, we lost a really great coach. How are we going to replace that guy? We're always in the business in football. We're like, did he stay 2 years too long? Was he here a year too long? That's always the thing. So we get the new guy, especially when he's young and looks the part and has some pedigree to him. That's always going to be exciting. So, I mean, they made the right hire for sure. I love the hire. It's hard for me to be like rah when I haven't seen, anything yet.
And just to follow up with what you said, I mean, I remember talking to Harry when we were talking, when we realized that the Seth era could be ending, kept saying, we need to hire the football version of Grant McCasland. We need to find the football version of Grant McCasland.
And this might be it. Yeah.
And this might be it. I mean, we've already seen him. He's buying, ice cream cones for the Green Brigade. He's talking to freshman orientation. He's checking all these extra boxes that aren't X's and O's, but at the same time, it's like one of the optimistic parts for me is we're not going from an air raid to a power run. I mean, it's not night and day difference. I mean, some of the verbiage is the same in the offense. It's not a full rebuild, I guess you could say. So you technically you're getting Seth, the offensive mind, maybe a little better quarterback evaluation, maybe a better quarterback coach evaluation, I guess you could say. But then you're also getting the extra personality, and that's what I I guess that has me the most optimistic about the future is just seeing the extracurricular stuff off the field that we haven't seen even translate to Saturdays yet.
And there's things that happened even well before him, this being where we are today. I know from good sources that Morris took money out of his pocket when he was negotiating his deal to give to assistants and analysts. And I really think that he's been, pretty refreshing in that regard in terms of trying to set up something here that is very competitive. And JD knows this as well as I do. I mean, we have more, recruiting staff and social media and
I started with Seth
stuff.
I'm
not saying that it didn't start with him a
Yeah.
little, but I'm seeing they've it's on steroids now. I mean, it's amazing how many they have. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is NIL era. We can, it's all Wild West
take
out there.
steroids.
Yeah, it's wide open.
No,
so.
I agree. I just, I always like to temper the what do you want side of things, because Dan did all the things that we wanted Seth to do, right? Dan was outgoing. Dan was all over the place. Then Seth came in and we loved him and for the first few years, and then we hated the introverted part of Seth because he wasn't doing those, but we also said that we didn't want the guy to do that because we wanted him to focus on football. So it's kind of like a pick your poison. Getting a guy that right down the middle would be great. A guy that can go out there and glad hand everybody, kiss all the babies, do all the things in the fundraiser, bring in money. But I mean, again, to quote Seth, at the end of the day, I mean, there's a practice facility that's indoor, and it's because of Seth. I mean, he had a big part in that, obviously. And so it's like you have to find the happy balance of what you want out of your coach. I think a college football coach should always be, outgoing and be able to go do all the things, whether they're good at it or not, should be able to go talk to people, because that's how you get the money. That's how you get the players, right? It's all about the recruiting, and you're basically recruiting sponsors, you're recruiting donors, you're recruiting everybody, fans, everything. It's not just players. But, I mean, it wins definitely also help. And, we liked the past two coaches when they were winning. When they stopped, we ran them out. We wanted them gone. And that's going to happen with Eric if he doesn't, if we're having a conversation in late November and we're at 3 or 4 wins, I mean, are we happy? Hell no. Right.
All right, let's talk about wins. So I don't know if can you guys see that? That's the first time I've tried to do that. All right, so let's talk about the schedule that we're up against this first year with Morris. To me, this is kind of a backward schedule. We're used to UTSA at the tail end. We're used to SMU up front. We're used to a lot of schools that we play year after year, all through in there. It's not quite the same this year. I mean, there's a few in there, but what do you guys think of the schedule compared to previous years?
It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy getting SMU in November. I think we've got a better chance. I do think that the worst part is we have the easiest schedule up front, and that's when you're transition with new coach, new complete staff, and then if you don't win some must-win games early on, once you get to October 21st in Tulane, you've got a gauntlet there that's Tulane, Memphis, UTSA, SMU. I mean, Tulsa, UAB. I mean, you finish out the season, those last 6 games, it could get ugly. So
we won't be favored. We won't be favored in one of those games. I mean, we'll be the underdogs in the whole second half of the season, quite honestly.
Yeah, maybe Tulsa and UAB, but I mean, really, there's the 4 major games there between the middle of October, middle of November. I mean, you got to win some early on, and there's some that's I think a lot of fans are viewing as easy wins, and I'm afraid that some of them aren't. I mean, La Tech's got Boise State's old quarterback. Navy's going to run the triple option. Temple's got Kurt Warner's son. So I mean, there's some games early on that you look at the schedule and you're like, oh, that's a win. But when you really dig down a little deeper, we're going to have to play good.
Wow, I didn't
It's
realize
going to
that was
be,
going to bring
yeah.
up so many negative waves there. All right, let's. I'll go ahead and get rid of the.
Sorry about that. I'm going to walk it off for
Yeah,
a second.
that's
Give me a water.
wow.
Y'all try to find some wins on that schedule. I'll be back.
Wow, we
Here,
got
yeah.
here a little bit.
JD's going to go find a new team in the
Yeah.
corner out there. Yeah, he's going to, yeah.
Yeah, I like Harry was like, yeah, we won't be favored on any of those. Come on, man. Positive.
No,
win.
I mean, I shouldn't say he's right. I mean, Tulsa, but Tulsa's got a really good quarterback, like a really good quarterback that's going to be interesting. And UAB has always been a tough game for us. I'm just saying it's a tough, it's that first, we need to do well in the first half of the season because the second half is going to be a lot tougher.
This is a schedule.
We also just have no idea.
Go ahead, Ashton.
Go ahead, Abby. No, I mean, I'm just going to keep going back to it. This is an unpredictable schedule, in my opinion. Like, I don't know what to expect. I don't know. Are we rebuilding? Are we just are we going to be, 2016 where we get a couple wins that we're like, wow, how we squeaked that one out? Because we thought we were rebuilding, and then all of a sudden we're like, wait, we're in a couple games here, and then we win something, and we go to Army and we win. We're like, what the hell, It's totally unpredictable. It's hard for me to see, more than 6 wins on the schedule, like JD said, because I do feel that some of these teams are pretty quality, and I don't know where we're at. I don't like playing SMU late in the season. I actually rather play them early. But yeah, that's just kind of.
I think this is the schedule that 6-7 years ago, 5-6 years ago, us saying back old school, us saying this is this is what your conference schedule is going to look like. I think we would have been ecstatic.
Absolutely.
Are we now thinking like, okay, no, we want to just be we want to win these? I mean, I think we're in a good place, but
I want these games to be tough because I want the AAC to be good.
Yeah.
I don't want Temple to be dog shit again. I don't want Tulane to go back to being Tulane of 10 years ago. I don't mean we want, somebody said Memphis at home seems very winnable. Memphis being very winnable to me is not good for the conference. In our state right now, I can't actively say like, yeah, Memphis seems really winnable. Like, Memphis is a good program. They've been doing pretty well. I don't know what they were last year. I don't even think I know what the record was last year. Were they good last year?
They beat us.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
overall, they barely beat us though. It was close.
I think we threw 2 pick sixes and we lost by 10. So
yeah, that's right. It was 10. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, were we good last season? I don't really know. Like, well, it's yeah.
The days of knowing a team's going to have up years slowly building up and then down years going down. Now with the way the portal has been, you never know from one year to the next what you've got really, other than having good key players you manage to hang on to somehow. If you've got too good of players, they're gone for most of your mid-level. That's the reality of where we're at now. And so it's who did you manage to keep and who did you manage to pick up luckily.
That's so true, Evan. And the UNLV game last year is a perfect example. They beat us bad.
Right.
And that they had like 40 new players or something. And
right.
It was like a complete you couldn't even really scout against them because they were all new guys. So I totally agree.
Right. And because of that, because of the portal factor here, I'm going to go back to what the comment was made earlier, and I can't find it here, but it's really going to the Cal game. We're going to see what we actually have and how it all molds together. What we brought in, what we lost is really going to show in the Cal game. And that first week, we're going to know the rest of these teams on this schedule, what they really have. I mean, it's not going to be a surprise after that. Right now, I don't know how you'd pick anything, just the way everything's moved around. It's just kind of the luck on some of these.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I mean, Jared M. I guess Jared Mosley's in the chat. That's interesting. I like his 7-5 prediction. I think that that's I was thinking 6 wins. Again, I think I'm always kind of like, let's just get to 6. But a lot of new coaches. I love that point. That's a really good point. There are a lot of new coaches in the conference this year. There's a lot of turnover. I think when you get past, certain P5s, there's a lot of parity nowadays, and we're not in Conference USA anymore. I know the AAC is a lot of Conference USA, but or former Conference USA, what have you. It looks like Conference USA overall the past like 15 years. The teams that are in AAC now that were in Conference USA back in the day. I think that it's going to be interesting to see what these other teams are like. And Cal's a great first test. I'm glad we're getting Cal off the bat. Hit 6. That's funny. And then I can't even think now. I'm going back to 2013 when we actually won a bowl game. But I think that getting that Cal game. I hope if we get blown out, people don't walk up saying, "Well, that's a P5 school." They're not. They're not. Like Cal is barely a P5 school. They're in a conference that doesn't even exist anymore. So I don't want to hear that excuse. I don't want the fake optimism of like, well, Cal's Cal. We should have beat them in 2019. Was it 19? Yeah, 2019, the Rico Bussey injury year. We should have beat them that game. And we didn't, and so I'm really excited to see what we look like against Cal. If we lose by a touchdown, and it's a good game and Cal looks good and we don't make bonehead plays, I'll walk out still pretty positive because, we do have to give Eric a little bit of grace on the first couple games, getting his legs under him, but he has been a head coach before. So,
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I took the schedule down because some people were getting a little too awkward there with the schedule. So, all right. So, John, I think we're probably towards the end here in closing comments. I think everybody's excited. We've got a quarterback. We've got a little bit of things are starting to cement in place and knowing what we're going to look like for the first game. Like I said, 17 days away, and it's going to be a hot one. Any last thoughts from anybody on where we're at and what's coming?
Man, I'm just excited.
Realignment.
Yeah. In realignment, it's kind of taken away a lot of the usual banner back and forth about the season. I'm ready for that to be over. That's really dragging everything.
The worst part about that anybody that can get on the Twitter X thing. Now people, it's like somebody will throw up, hey, I heard about this new look at this new super conference here that's coming up. And then people just retweet that. And then you got to go figure out, well, where did that start? Where did that happen? No, there's nothing to it. Some bozo with Photoshop decided to put that together. Photoshop? Yeah. Put that all together and just threw it out there. And so it's almost, you got to search news articles and find out if there's any legitimacy behind it. I think everybody just wants it to sit for a while and nothing to happen, but I don't know if we're going to get there. And I don't know what the end game is going to be on all that. It's just going to be a revolving circus until there's some kind of a new plan out there.
I was talking to, I'm sure some people saw today, the ACC is really looking pretty seriously at what is it? SMU, and then is it Cal? I saw the Cal. Like I talked to somebody, a writer. He's a Big Ten writer, but Big Ten is obviously pretty tapped in. And one of my old Big Ten contacts, and he seems to really think that SMU is almost a shoo-in for the ACC. I don't really know where he got that, but I just got that text the other day.
I think
actually. I think
it sounds like a done deal. Yeah, it sounds like a done deal. Just like stuff I read before the show.
Yeah, realignment is weird, and it does dominate the storylines, and we're always wondering where everybody's going, and the regional rivalries are dead and everything. It's just it's changing the landscape for sure, and it's pretty annoying because we always seem to get left out, and as soon as we go into a conference, I feel like then realignment hits the fan again. So right when we got announced to go to the Conference USA, that's when all of a sudden like A&M's like, hey, we're going to the SEC. I'm like, wait, what? And so because our first year at Conference USA was A&M's second in SEC with Missouri. So it's always kind of always ever changing, and it's all TV deals. And if you can get out of your contract before it expires, then then it's great. So it's thoroughly annoying, but it's also kind of makes it interesting.
What I will say just about the realignment, I came up with my own little map, put it on there. Part of it's coming true. SMU, AAC, you leave the other two pack, Oregon State, Washington State, they're still available. Me personally, I feel a lot more comfortable where we're at right now. I think the American financially, media deal, we're set up really nicely. If we lose SMU, the American will not crumble. I think we're going to take that money. We're going to take the money of the schools that went to the Big 12, and we're going to reload. And I think that we're going to put ourselves in a primetime position to be, wherever that echelon of SEC, Big 12, Big 10, the Americans got a good chance in 2 or 3 years to be that next school up, especially when the AAC, Clemson, Florida State, those schools start leaving. I mean, you're talking about looking at a map, you're going to have Wake Forest and Stanford in the same conference. And I mean, how many people is going to go to University of Park to watch SMU versus Duke football on a Thursday night? 2,500. I mean, it's, to me, I much rather, bring up a Texas State to take SMU's place, just because to keep those regional battles, I think those are fun. I think that's where the G5 or whatever you want to call it, football, is really going to take a step up in the next few years with the regional battles, where you're going to have the Big 10 schools, Oregon and Rutgers playing. Like, I just don't see that moving the needle.
Do you ever think we'll be at a time where there's got to be some mechanism where you see more of a regional setup, where you've got your really good, like any kind of a high school district, you got really good teams and you got some bottom teams, they just play, then there's like a bigger group, and they come and there's a finalists and all this. You think we're ever going to be there? Are we just going to see always a constant shifting until you have a Premier League / sub? I mean, what's the ultimate thing we think we're going to end with this?
It's going to soccer. I mean, like you said, it's going to, it's like an EPL kind of breakdown, and it's not hard to see that outcome. Yeah. Really. I think it's not.
The Olympic schools, I feel like that's really the way we're heading. The Olympic schools are going to have to break off and kind of go their own ways and go more regional. Because, I saw it the other night talking about like a softball team on a Tuesday night. Like, Stanford's going to be going to the East Coast on a Tuesday night, playing 2 softball games. And then, then you got to fly back to California. Some of that stuff doesn't make sense logistically for the kids that are going to school. For football, 1 day a week, you can make exceptions 10 weeks out of the year. For the other schools, like, it's not feasible.
Oh, it's brutal.
Yeah. Well, for the record, guys, just to clarify, everything I'm reading right now says they're just doing it for football, basketball, and women's basketball, that the other sports are going to find a home on the West Coast. So that is, at least right now, sounds like they may be kind of sidestepping that and doing, 3 sports over there, but it's still a long trip for those 3 sports to go back from the West and the East Coast. And this is supposed to be all about student athletes, right? BS. Come on. It's about money. It's about ESPN.
Oh yeah. It's not, you can't tell me when Rutgers plays UCLA, it's about student athletes. It's not, that's literally the farthest ends of the country.
Exactly.
You can't get much different than, unless, I guess, like, Florida playing Washington State. I guess that's the equivalent. And that's not going to happen. So yeah, it's not, it's all about dollars. It's all about TV. On the ticket this morning, they talked about, they had a really good conversation about the Longhorn Network and how that kind of like almost started a lot of this, because, you had a school that had a network, and then, and ESPN, took it in the shorts for a lot of that because of, money wise, and if SMU bolts to the ACC, great, screw them. It's nice to then know that, with UT out and Oklahoma out of the Big 12, then really outside of TCU, there's no schools really between here and Oklahoma State in that whole North Texas, Oklahoma region. And that looks good for us, that if they really want to control North Texas, well, then add the only school left in North Texas, outside of TCU, that's already in the Big 12. So I like that for a potential Big 12 move if that's a possibility down the road. But it's almost impossible to predict, and it's a guessing game. Because if you would have told me a couple years ago or last year that SMU might go to the ACC, I would have been like, well, no, they're going to go to the Big 12. Like that even if the Big 12 says they don't want them, ACC would have been so foreign to me.
And
then,
the reports are talking about going 7 years without taking media money. Like, to me, that's just like, why don't you just give yourself the death penalty? Because
it's obscene, man. It's obscene that they're buying their way into this conference. I mean, it's literally they're bankrolling their way into a bigger conference.
And I'm not 100% sure. I mean, me outside looking in, I don't know if they wouldn't be better off staying the American, keeping your money, keeping your regional battles, and if you're wanting to move up, wait for the next go around. But to me, I don't see moving to the East Coast benefiting them one bit. You're not taking money. You're just gaining Power 5 status, and I don't know.
Yeah, but I think that they look at it like the AAC is not the same as it was 2 years ago because a bunch of teams lower than them, Conference USA teams, just joined. So when you're in a conference and other teams start coming in, you feel that you're not at the upper echelon, I think. So I think that they do think that they need to get out to be separated from the UTSAs and the UNTs. And I think that's where their mind is, personally. I mean, because I know that if next year we got a bunch of Sunbelt teams and whatever lower teams coming in the AAC, and we're just Conference USA again, do I really feel great about my AAC move if I'm just Conference USA, again? I mean, you have to kind of look at it from a standpoint of like, where are you actually moving up? If the lower teams are just moving up with you, like, how far did you really go?
That's a good point. All right, anything else, guys?
Thanks,
Before we close it out, we're almost at the top of the hour.
GoMeanGreen.
GoMeanGreen.
All right, we'll talk
Good
to
to see
everybody
everybody.
soon.
Football
GoMeanGreen.
season. Yay.
GoMeanGreen.
Green.